Om Akhandamandalakaram Vyaptam Yen Characharam Tadpadam Darshitam Yen Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah. Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwara Gurur Sakshat Parbrahma Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om. Om. Allow me the opportunity to bathe in this moment. My parents used to say to me that if you're going to do sadhana and you're going to ask for something, then always ask for the company of people of wisdom and learning. And I've always asked for that, but my sadhana is imperfect because I always ask to be able to sit at the feet of wise people and listen to them. But the fact that I'm standing here speaking in the presence of some of our wisest and most learned people is an indication of how imperfect my sadhana is. But we are here. Thank you everybody for coming, and thank you to everybody who has come from so far away. We have visitors, I know, this year from the United Kingdom, from the US, and this year's Jaipur Dialogues looks as though it's going to be the best of the Jaipur Dialogues, and hopefully it will set the bar for future Jaipur Dialogues. I was very kindly You are such a good audience. Thank you. I was kindly invited by Sanjay ji a while ago. He said, Satish ji, you must come. And I thought I'd come and have a nice quiet 2 days in Jaipur and also engage in a little bit of Samudra Manthan with some incredible speakers. And then I realized that I was given the opening slot early in the morning when most people have traveled from Delhi and places like that. I arrived at 2 a.m. last night. And so most people are like me, a little bit dazed and glazed. I'm going to try and keep the subject of my talk very relevant. When people have gathered, people of wisdom have gathered, we have a tradition that when people gather to address a problem, the gurus, the devas, they all congregate and give their blessings. Normally there is a shower of flowers which falls from the heavens. And as I'm standing here looking, I'm seeing we have the blessings of our gurus and devas here in your own presence. If you have so much commitment that you're willing to be here at such an early hour, then that's a blessing in its own right. So thank you very much to the audience for coming. Really appreciate it. We have just heard an invocation in Sanskrit. Sanskrit is the most beautiful language. And in my mind, it's the language which contains Vidya, Gyan, and the most beautiful experiences of humanity. Hindi is a beautiful language which is the divine language of affection and prema and love. And to make sure that we include everything, I'm speaking in English, which is the harshest of languages. It's the language of domination. It's the language of control. It's the language of rulership. And so as part of our Samudra Manthan, I'm going to be contributing an experience of that. I was wondering what I'm going to talk about in the presence of our Dharma gurus, who are masters of Dharma Shastras. What do I have to teach them? Very little. But my particular area of expertise, having lived in the West for over 55 years, is probably Adharma. If I'm a master of an understanding, it's an understanding of what Adharma is. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about Adharma, and hopefully that will set the context for the rest of the 2 days. And we can use my guidance about Adharma to understand what we need to do. How do we recognize Adharma? How do we recognize Vidharmis, Adharmis, in a manner that we can interact and engage them? I had a wonderful set of thoughts set up this morning. Then I bumped into dear and respected Adharnya Professor Gupta over breakfast. And so he added a few more thoughts in. And I'm just assimilating some of his wisdom. He mentioned the four Purusharth. And if I was trying to understand what is Dharma and what is Adharma, I would say that Adharma is the understanding and the identity which is stuck in Kam and Arth. It has no knowledge of the other two Purusharth. It tries to find Anand in Kam and Arth. Now, as Sanatanis, as people of an ancient dharmic civilization, we struggle to understand the way in which civilizations and people who are stuck in Kam and Arth behave. The number of times I've heard our dharmic family say, "Ye inhone kyon kiya?" with outrage. In the United Kingdom, we had an attack on the Hindu community in Leicester. And so many people were saying, "Why? Humne to kuch kiya hi nahi. We are innocent." And it takes a while for dharmic people to understand the nature of adharmic people. And so in the time that I have, I'm going to try and share that with you. What we had in Leicester was an attempt to ethnically cleanse Hindus from a part of Leicester. Here in 2022, in the United Kingdom, a town where 46% of the population is Hindu, the largest Hindu community, we had Adharma in action. They had decided they wanted the calm, the anand that comes through violence, because there is an addiction to that anand as well. You may have seen on your screens the hatred in their eyes, the anger in their voice, and yet they were experiencing anand, these feral children who were doing this. They wanted the earth of that location in Leicester because it was their area, and they didn't like the presence of Sanatanis in their area. And you saw the anand that they got in shouting and scaring. In one of our mandirs, we had Pitrupaksh being commemorated. Elders were in mandirs and they were reflecting upon the contribution of our ancestors. And outside, there were people screaming and shouting at them, making light and denigrating and vilifying them. But they were infused with anand as well. So it's important to understand how this functions. What I'm hoping by the end is that you will have something of use to you. Anybody who is a sadhak, he will take what is helpful for his sadhana in every instance and then be able to act on it. And we are descendants of a civilization based on Gyana and Vidya. And so we need to understand before we then act. And one of the easiest ways to prevent wise people from acting is to keep them confused. If you say to a computer, 2 plus 2 equals 4, 2 plus 3 equals 7, the computer will go into a loop. But what we do as people who are traditionally rooted in Vidya, we try and work things out. We try and understand everything. And it's only when we understand that we see clearly what to do. This was the conundrum on the Kurukshetra that Arjun faced as well. And so I'm hoping to share with you some understandings from the Adharma Kshetra, where I have done my Karam Seva. Bharat is this location, but there are no boundaries anymore. There are no national borders. There are no regions which are sacrosanct. There are no democratic boundaries anymore. What there exists now is one Kurukshetra. And something that is said here in Bharat resonates straight away in the rest of the world. And what happens in Leicester resonates and impacts upon what happens here. So whether we like it or not, we are in a battlefield. There is a battle going on, and we need to recognize who the enemy is, what their identity is, and what their problem is. And we have a unique responsibility. When you have civilizations which only know Kam and Arth and how to become addicted to the Anand that Kam and Arth brings, it is only the children of a dharmic perspective who can show them what the next step in human societal evolution is. That means you. Each and every one of us is the recipient. The very fact that we exist is because in our ancestry we had courageous people who said, Hum dharm ko nahi chhodenge. And so each and every one of us has this responsibility. But how do we recognize the motives of the adharmis and the vidharmis? In 1833, William Wilberforce in the United Kingdom, he started a movement to ban slavery. And he is known throughout the world as the man who banned slavery throughout the British Empire. And in publicizing this event, suddenly he acquired a great deal of stature. And Britain to this day says, we are the civilization which banned slavery throughout the world. But slavery, which is the tattva of what the British Empire was all about, comes in three forms. The first is physical slavery, where your very existence and the labor of your body belongs to somebody else. But there are two other ways of slavery. One is emotional and the other is intellectual. And what they worked out was how to enslave people in a manner that would give them the benefits, and the people who were enslaved would not even suspect what had happened. There's a Vakya, Sanjayji said, do we have any Mahavakyas from the West? And I said, there are one or two that I can think of. One of the Vakyas was Voltaire. He was a French philosopher. And he said, if you can make people believe in absurdities, you can make them commit atrocities. So step one is make people believe in things which are utterly absurd. Another Vakya which is relevant here and I'd share with you was from a philosopher called Goethe, a German philosopher, and he said, none are so enslaved as those who falsely believe they are free. So there are two ideas that I want you to take away with you, and that is that it's possible to make people believe in absurdities, and then you can make them commit atrocities. And the second thing is that it's possible to believe that you're free when really you're not. So if you can use those two principles, you can get rid of physical slavery because you have worked out how to enslave populations without them ever suspecting it. And so the first proposition I'm going to put forward to you is that the Euro-Christian empires which were built and spanned the whole of the West, they were built on slavery. And there is a nasha, there is an addiction to that power. The story we've all been told is it came to the 1900s, the late 1800s, they banished slavery because they had evolved to a stage where they thought this is terrible and we don't want to do this. But the proposition I'm putting forward is actually what they did was more cunning. They stopped physical slavery because they'd put into place the mechanisms for slavery without any perception of it. And that's a power. And so even to this day, the proposition that I'm sharing is that slavery is rampant. How do we find a toolkit which can be used to enslave people? And if you were to create a toolkit which could enslave whole populations, Wouldn't that be a powerful asset? So the first thing is we have this wonderful concept of samskara. And so I want to share with you an understanding of what sanskar is from my point of view. Sanskar, inside of our identity, we have a little room. Let's call it a truth room. And it's where you store what you have accepted as being satya. So much so that you will never interrogate it again. You build your decisions on that, on the contents of that room. So if I can put something into your truth room, I know you will act upon it without ever interrogating it. And the time when you can do that is either a time of distress, a time of chaos, or a time of childhood. Because children have broad open doors to their truth room. And whatever you put into there at that time, they will build their life on it. So if I wanted to enslave huge numbers of humanity without them ever knowing it, I would want to open schools where I can teach them absurdities so that at a later point I can make them commit atrocities. In that manner, we can enslave whole populations. And samskar is such a powerful weapon. Who here watched the 10 days of funerals for Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II? I'm sure we all saw some of it. In the United Kingdom, I was watching children crying, elderly parents in tears, devastated. But with my vision, I was watching a whole generation around the world being seeded with samskar. That's the power of these ceremonies. People in tears, even though they had never met these people, even though they never knew this history. This is how powerful the capacity to enslave people is. And if I then recorded the means whereby I could corrupt somebody's understanding in a textbook, then I would want to make that textbook protected. I would call it a holy text. And I would train people on how to use that toolkit to plant the sanskar of slavery into the minds of people. And then I would pass legislation saying freedom of religion and belief is so important. And yet when you look at freedom of religion and belief in the hands of people who are only committed to deriving anand from Kam and Arth, suddenly you see a different picture beginning to emerge. Am I going too fast? In 25 minutes, I wanted to inject you with an antivirus for being radicalized. You know, I never meant to be doing this work. I was having a very nice, comfortable life in the United Kingdom. In 2014, I got a phone call, and it was from the Secretary of State at the time. And I was summoned to the House of Commons, and I thought, kuch gadbad hai. I went to see him, and on his desk he had a file. And on that file was written my name and confidential. And he opened it up and he read through it. And I sat there waiting for what it was I was there for. Lord Eric Pickles he is now. And he said, Satish, I have one question for you. Why is it that Hindus don't radicalize? So understand this. A Secretary of State in the United Kingdom asked a Dharmic scholar to come and talk to him about why Hindus don't radicalize. And I didn't have an answer. I gave him a response, and I could have talked about Dharma Shastras and Karma and everything else, but I didn't have an answer that I felt was adequate. So I thought, I need to know, why is it that Hindus don't radicalize and others do? And that's what started my journey and exploration of Adharma. What is it that makes us immune to this? And I'm sharing with you some of the fruits of that exploration. When you ask a person who is healthy, why is it you're not ill? This is the problem I had when I'm sitting across from the Secretary of State, and I'm thinking, what can I say to him? But it's the pathology of disease that we study. And so I'm sharing with you some of the understandings I've acquired about the pathology of disease, because Adharma is a disease of humanity. Only human beings can act in an adharmic manner. And we act in an adharmic manner when our hirdayam, our heart, has been corrupted with fear or guilt, or we act in an adharmic manner when our intellect has been corrupted by accepting stupidity, absurdities, and then we commit atrocities. So it's worth understanding the pathology of Adharma, as well as focusing completely on the wonderful Dharma Shastras. And if we're going to be successful and fulfill our role and responsibility, which is to help humanity become healed of its adharmic disease, then we need to be the practitioners of Ayurveda or medicine so that we can do this healing. And this is what our main role is. There is conversations of the Bharat being a Vishwaguru, but that's the purpose that we have now existed for. That's what our responsibility and duty will be. It's perfectly reasonable, as I've said, to enjoy Anand out of Adharma, and it has its own addiction. First step, please recognize that we're dealing with people who are addicted to Adharma. We're dealing with civilizations who are addicted to Adharma. They know only Kam and they only know Artha. So when they come here, when you have an ambassador coming from the United States, we need to recognize that although as human beings, they are dharmic creatures, they are carrying a disease of Adharma. And we are in the minority. Remember this, we are in the minority. But each of us is a carrier of antibodies, of antigens. And we have that capacity to communicate that, to infect that, and to undo the harm with each and every person. People say to me, what do you think about religion? What do you think about the conflict of all of these religions? And I can almost sense a ripple, an undercurrent of discomfort that, uh-oh, he's going to say something which is going to cause a problem here. But I'm not. Our understanding in our Sanatani tradition is that the earth has been engaged in sadhana for thousands of years to create an ecosystem which will support this physical form. And so when people came to Bharat with ideas that were crazy, we never said all dharma, all religions are the same. We never gave equality and reverence to stupid ideas. But what we loved and what we respected were the human beings themselves. We worshipped Devi and her sadhana in welcoming all of those people to this land. It's a mistake to think that we gave equality of reverence and respect to ideas which were frankly absurd. That's not the truth. And it's about time that we with confidence stepped forward and recognized that there are some ideas that are frankly stupid. There is no requirement on a human being to give respect and courtesy to an idea which requires their immolation, or to honor a relationship which is blatantly an abusive relationship. But with courage, we can enter into those relationships, even those which are abusive relationships, once we are healed and once we are strong. And the next 2 days that we have here is such an amazing opportunity for each and every one of us to infect each other with so much Pran Shakti, so much clarity of thought, so much integrity of understanding, that when we leave this place, each and every person we come into contact with is also infected with the Pran Shakti of Dharma. I'm going to conclude with one small analogy. I learned an awful lot from my Punjabi parents, and there are village tales in Punjab which are the most beautiful, beautiful stories. And one thing that resonated with me when I was thinking about good and evil with my father, and he said, "Beta, there is no such thing as good and evil." He said, "We don't have that concept in our tradition. And there are no bad people because in our tradition there is no other. In each and every person, we see beyond identity." And so I pulled out the example. I said, "Well, what about Ravan? You know, we went there and wreaked havoc on his kingdom and his people. Wasn't he a bad person?" And just to help me understand, he recited a poem which stuck with me. And I always use it to remind myself that there are no real enemies other than a bunch of thoughts and feelings, confusion in other people. And the poem was to do with the instance when Surpanakha comes to Lanka. And she says to Ravan, she said, "Ye mera hal dekho." And Ravan thinks about it, and Ravan, the villain who we burn in the Sara, he responded saying, "जिस एक अकेले व्यक्ति ने 14,000 योद्धा संहार दिया, तो निश्चय ही ये सत्य है नारायण ने अवतार लिया। वो हरि है, मैं हरि भक्त हूँ, बैर का नाता जोड़ूंगा, बंधन जन्म जन्मांतर के इसी जन्म में तोड़ूंगा। मौत नहीं है, मोक्ष है ये, बैर नहीं अनुराग है ये, भगवान हो, तीर भी उनका हो, भक्तों के लिए सुहाग है ये." And remember, when Ravan was defeated, Ramchandraji sent Lakshman to him with respect and honor to ask him for guidance. And if at that time, after so much trauma, Ramchandraji was able to maintain that tranquility and clarity of thought, that's an example for us. And if we can maintain that, we have a uniquely dharmic offering into this Dharma Yudh. And जीत तो हमारी ही होगी, वो तो होनी है. Jai Shri Ram to everybody.